The galley was filled with muffled shouting, the kind of sharp words that made flight attendants trade uneasy glances. The passengers leaned in their seats, straining to catch even a hint of the confrontation. The only clear thing was that Collins's voice had shifted from booming commands to brittle excuses. The captain's voice cut through, calm but heavy. "You've endangered this flight enough. Step aside." Seconds later, the curtain snapped open. The captain strode into the aisle, his presence steady as stone. Behind him, Collins followed, face pale, jaw clenched, 2 security officers flanking him like shadows. The captain spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. I want to be clear. Every paying passenger has the right to respect, dignity, and safety. This family is staying on this flight." Applause erupted, first tentative, then swelling into a thunder of claps and cheers. Danielle covered her mouth, tears streaming. Her daughter clung tighter to the teddy bear but smiled for the first time all night. Marcus gripped his son's shoulder, pride etched into his tired face. Collins's voice cracked as he tried one last time. "You can't do this! You need me!" The captain turned, his eyes cold. "What I need is a crew that respects every passenger. You're relieved of duty. Leave the aircraft." The crowd roared. Phones zoomed in, capturing every second. The security officer stepped forward, guiding Collins down the aisle. He yanked his arm back once, glaring at Marcus. "You think you won something tonight? This isn't over." Marcus met his glare head-on. "It's over for you, not for us." The words landed like a gavel. Collins flinched, then was marched toward the door. The metallic thunk of the cabin door closing behind him felt like a victory bell. For a heartbeat, the cabin was silent, the weight of what had just happened settling over everyone. Then it exploded into cheers. Passengers clapped. Some stood. Others raised their phones in triumph. Strangers reached across aisles to pat Marcus on the shoulder, to tell Danielle she was strong, to smile at the children who had just watched their parents stand tall against humiliation. The captain leaned toward Marcus's row, his voice softer now. "Mr. and Mrs. Carter, on behalf of this airline, I apologize. That man's behavior was unacceptable. I promise you it won't be ignored." Danielle wiped her cheeks. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice raw. Marcus nodded, steady but tired. "We just wanted to take our kids on a trip, that's all." "And you will," the captain said firmly. As the plane pushed back from the gate, the hum of the engines rising, Marcus's son tugged at his sleeve. "Dad, everyone cheered for us." Marcus smiled, pulling him close. "They didn't cheer for us, son. They cheered for what's right." His daughter lifted her teddy bear high, waving it like a tiny flag, and the passengers nearby laughed softly, the tension melting into something lighter, something almost joyful. The plane lifted into the night sky, leaving the chaos behind. But the story wouldn't stay in that cabin. Phones had captured it all: Collins's rage, the family's dignity, the passengers' revolt. By the time they landed, the world would know. Hours later, when Marcus and Danielle guided their children off the plane, passengers clapped again, a final salute. Danielle's daughter beamed, her teddy bear still in hand. Marcus's son walked taller than before, shoulders squared like his father's. In the terminal, reporters were already gathering, phones buzzing with notifications. Videos had spread online before the plane even touched down. The headlines screamed across every feed. Flight manager removed after racist confrontation. Passengers defend black family. And somewhere in an office stripped of authority and respect, Collins sat alone, his career crumbling. The Carters walked on, heads high. They hadn't asked to be heroes, but tonight, in a sky that belonged to everyone, they had proven one truth that no one could take away. They belonged.
The classroom door clicked shut behind the principal, but his presence was felt like a storm cloud rolling in. Principal Harris was not the kind of man who entered a room quietly. He didn't need to shout or wave his authority like a flag. He simply was. A tall man in his 50s, built broad in the shoulders, with streaks of silver in his close-cut hair, his suit always sharp, his voice always steady. Students sat straighter, shifting in their seats, their phones lowering just slightly. Miss Whitfield glanced over her shoulder, her spine stiffening. But instead of stopping, she straightened, clutching Marcus's essay in her fist. "Good timing, Principal Harris," she said, her voice overly bright. "You'll want to see this. Yet another example of wasted potential. I was just explaining to young Marcus here why his work is far below standard. Perhaps you'll back me up when I say—" She held the paper aloft, the red ink slashes gleaming like fresh wounds. Harris didn't respond immediately. He stepped farther into the classroom, his gaze sweeping across the rows of desks, over the students shifting uncomfortably, over the glow of half-hidden phone screens, before finally settling on Marcus. The boy hadn't looked away once. His chin was raised, his jaw tight, his dark eyes locked on Whitfield with something between fury and endurance. "Continue," Harris said at last, his voice calm. "I'd like to hear how you address your students." Whitfield blinked, caught off guard, then squared her shoulders. "Of course. As I was saying, Marcus, stand up." Marcus hesitated, his chair scraping against the floor as he pushed back. His legs felt heavy, as if each muscle carried the weight of the room's stairs. He rose, standing tall despite the tremor in his chest. Whitfield thrust the paper toward him. "Explain this essay. Explain why you thought you could hand me this garbage and expect it to be acceptable." Marcus didn't move. His throat was dry, but he forced the words out. "I wrote it myself, every word. I worked until 2 in the morning 3 nights in a row. I did research. I revised. Whitfield laughed, cutting him off. "Oh, please, spare me the excuses. You don't belong in advanced history. You don't have the discipline or the intellect. This class requires real effort." The word intellect hit like a whip. Several students flinched. Phones tilted higher. Someone whispered, "Is she really saying this in front of the principal?" Marcus's fists curled at his sides. He wanted to shout, to tell her that he'd stayed up while his mother worked night shifts, while his younger siblings slept in the next room, while he combed through library books and online journals just to make sure his paper was strong. But he swallowed it down. He would not give her his anger. "I do belong here," he said again, voice stronger this time. Whitfield's smile thinned. "Confidence doesn't equal competence, Marcus." She turned slightly toward the principal, as if inviting his agreement. "This is the problem with students like him. They coast on attitude instead of ability. Students like him?" Harris's voice cut through, sharp enough to freeze her mid-sentence. Whitfield blinked. "Well, you know what I mean. The ones who are always disruptive, who refuse to learn, who—" "I see a student standing here quietly. I see a student being spoken to in a way no child should be spoken to. And I see a classroom full of witnesses." The room held its breath. Whitfield faltered, color rising in her cheeks. "With all due respect, Principal Harris, I run this class. Discipline is my responsibility. If a student hands in poor work—" "Poor work!" a voice piped up from the back. It was Jordan, one of Marcus's classmates. He raised his phone higher. "His paper was better than mine, and I got a B. You gave him a D for the same thing you praised me on." Heads turned. A ripple of murmurs spread. Whitfield snapped. "Put that phone away, Jordan, or I'll confiscate it." But Harris's gaze shifted to the glowing screen. "No, leave it on. In fact, let me see." Jordan stood, walking down the aisle to hand his phone to the principal. Harris studied the video, the faint red glow of recording lights catching his face. Students leaned forward, breathless. The phone speaker crackled faintly as the video replayed the last 5 minutes. Whitfield's voice, sharp and mocking, Marcus's quiet insistence, the laughter, the phrase, "you people." The blood drained from Whitfield's face. Harris handed the phone back, his expression unreadable. "Thank you, Jordan. Continue recording, please. I'd like a full account of this." Whitfield's mouth opened, then closed again, her confidence crumbling. "You can't just... This is my classroom. These kids are..." "They're not your punching bags," Harris said quietly. Marcus felt a rush in his chest, a release like air after being underwater too long. For the first time all period, he wasn't alone. But Whitfield wasn't done. She straightened, her voice rising in pitch. "You think he deserves to be here? Fine, let him prove it. Marcus, explain your essay, out loud. Let's see if you even know what you wrote." The class groaned softly. Someone whispered, "She's digging her own grave." Marcus swallowed, his palms sweating. He hadn't prepared to defend his paper in front of 30 pairs of eyes, but he remembered every word he'd written, every late night, every note he'd scribbled in the margins of borrowed books. He lifted his chin. "My essay was about the Reconstruction era after the Civil War. I wrote about how freed slaves were promised rights, but systems were put in place to take those rights away. I talked about black codes and how they laid the foundation for Jim Crow laws. And I compared it to now, how promises are still made and still broken." Silence. The words hung in the air like sparks. Even the kids who usually tuned out history class sat forward listening. Danielle, a girl 2 rows up, whispered, "Damn, that's good." Whitfield's face tightened. You plagiarized that. You couldn't have..." "No, I didn't," Marcus said firmly. "I spent hours researching. I used 4 different sources. I even checked my citations twice. I worked harder than I ever have on anything." And for the first time, his voice didn't shake. Harris's gaze softened as he studied Marcus, then turned sharp as a blade back to Whitfield. "And yet you dismissed it out of hand. You humiliated him publicly. You made assumptions instead of teaching." Whitfield flushed red. "You're twisting this. I was pushing him. That's my job." "Your job is to challenge students, not break them. Your job is to inspire learning, not strip dignity. What I've witnessed today is not teaching. It's abuse." The class gasped, phones angled higher. The walls themselves seemed to lean in. Marcus sat slowly, his legs trembling but his chest full of fire. His classmates leaned toward him, whispering encouragement, patting his shoulder. For once, the weight of being singled out wasn't crushing, it was lifting. And across the room, Whitfield's mask of control cracked. The air in the classroom was thick, charged, as if every breath carried sparks. Miss Whitfield stood frozen at the front, her cheeks burning red, her hand trembling with the essay still crumpled in her grip. Around her, the students sat upright, phones angled like a wall of witnesses. Every second stretched longer than the last. Principal Harris folded his arms, his eyes never leaving her. "I've seen enough." The words were calm, almost too calm, and yet the weight behind them pressed like thunder. Whitfield stammered, I was only trying to hold him accountable. These students need discipline. They need someone to humiliate them?" Harris's voice sliced through, sharper now. "To call them names? To mark their hard work as worthless because of your own bias?" Her lips trembled, her eyes darting toward the students, as if searching for support. None came. Not one hand raised, not one sympathetic glance. Instead, their faces were hard, some angry, some disappointed, all recording. Marcus sat quietly at his desk, heart pounding. For weeks, he had carried the weight of being singled out, of feeling like every effort would be twisted into failure. But now, with the eyes of his classmates on her instead of him, the burden felt lighter. "You've crossed a line,"
Harris continued, stepping closer. And you crossed it in front of 30 witnesses. This isn't the first complaint I've received about your behavior, Miss Whitfield, but it will be the last I ignore. Her mouth opened in protest, but before she could speak, a voice piped up from the middle row. She told me last month my essays didn't sound smart enough. It was Danielle, usually quiet, her hands gripping her desk. I didn't say anything because I didn't think anyone would believe me. Another student joined in. She laughed when I asked a question, said it was stupid. She gave me detention for no reason. Same. The floodgates opened. Voices spilled from every row, overlapping, building. One after another, students spoke up, their courage growing as they realized they weren't alone. The room filled with a chorus of testimonies, each one striking another crack into the wall Whitfield had built around herself. She stumbled back a step, eyes wide, as if the very ground beneath her was giving way. This is ridiculous! They're exaggerating, lying! No, Harris said firmly. They're telling the truth, and you're proving it with every word you speak. Her voice broke. You can't take their word over mine. Harris leaned closer, his voice low but deadly clear. I don't need to. They've recorded you. Gasps rippled through the classroom. Whitfield's eyes snapped to the glowing phones, dozens of tiny cameras capturing her downfall in real time. Delete those, she barked, her voice shrill. You don't have permission to— Stop, Harris said sharply. They're within their rights. You created this spectacle. You made this public. Now it's documented. The silence that followed was suffocating. Harris turned to Marcus. Marcus, gather your things. You don't need to sit here a moment longer. Marcus blinked, his chest tight. Slowly, he slipped his notebook into his backpack, sliding the strap over his shoulder. The room watched as he rose, standing taller than he had ever felt in his life. Whitfield's voice cracked, desperation leaking through. You're going to ruin me over one paper? One child's tantrum? Harris's expression hardened. No, you ruined yourself the moment you decided your prejudice was more important than your students' futures. This isn't about one child. It's about every child you've torn down instead of lifted up. Her face crumpled, her hand clutching at the desk as if it could anchor her, but nothing could stop the tide that had already turned. Marcus walked toward the door, the classroom parting around him. His classmates whispered encouragement as he passed. Good job, man. She's done for. You showed her. Danielle, the quiet girl from earlier, reached out and gave him a gentle squeeze. Don't let her words stick. You're better than that. Marcus nodded, swallowing hard. His throat burned, not for humiliation this time, but for pride. At the door, Harris paused, his gaze sweeping over the class. To every one of you, if you've ever been made to feel small in this room, know this: it ends today. Your voices matter, and no teacher, no authority figure has the right to strip that away from you. The class broke into applause, hesitant at first, then louder, stronger, until the room echoed with it. Phones captured the moment, their cheers, the stunned face of a teacher who had believed herself untouchable. Marcus stepped out of the classroom, the sound following him like a wave. For the first time in months, his chest felt light. He wasn't just walking out of a classroom. He was walking out with dignity, with truth on his side. Behind him, the applause still thundered. Ahead of him, the hall stretched wide, open. He walked on, shoulders straight, the principal at his side. And though he didn't say it out loud, his heart whispered the truth he had fought to prove all along. I belong here.